Rob recounts an anecdote from his shadowy past and talks about snap caps. Next.
Okay, today we're going to have a very quick little review of a product I purchased yesterday at Gander Mountain, but is it available at just about any gun store or sporting goods store in any of the larger chains. I'm sure these can probably be had at Walmart. Well, maybe at Walmart. Certainly at gun stores, certainly at Gander Mountain, probably at Dick's Sporting Goods stores, but Gander Mountain is a safe bet. This is a product by Zoom called Snap Caps. And if you'll notice, they look like bullets, but they're not. Let's go ahead and open them up here. And the packaging on this is more friendly than some. Popped open, don't need to resort to a knife. That's good. Looks like a bullet. And let me just grab a bullet here for comparison purposes. This is a 9mm Luger. Generally used for pistols, but also for carbines and also for submachine guns. Quite a bit actually from World War II on. This is a real live cartridge. You can see that the boxer primer, I don't know if you can see that or not, but it hasn't actually been engaged. Powder in here. This is a live round ready to go. Not something that you'd want to particularly play with if you're testing the action of your gun, certainly in your home. Bad things can happen. Quick story here. When I first got into guns right out of high school, talking about when I'm 17, when I graduated from high school, my friends and I were always very interested in history and World War II, and we also were very interested in guns for that reason, and basically all things having to do with militaria. Well, long story short, when we were 17, 18, our own persons, although still living in our parents' homes, we started to pursue our interest in firearms in earnest. And the first firearm that any of us purchased was a M1 carbine, not a actual military carbine, but one made by Universal. And I have that in my possession. I wish I would have brought it out, but I don't want to make the story any longer than it has to be. My friend purchased it, and one of the first things he did is he bought himself a box of ammunition, 50 rounds of M1 carbine, brought it back, and I can remember being in his bedroom with him, and I think maybe one other friend, and him taking the rounds out of the box, the 50 rounds, putting them in the magazine. An M1 carbine uses either a 15-round magazine or a 30-round magazine called a banana magazine, or sometimes improperly a banana clip. Generally, there's other magazines available, but those two standard. He loaded up his 15-round magazine, put the magazine in the gun, and then to kind of test the action, he had the gun in his hand, and grabbing the bolt, he pulled it back and released it, and did that 15 times. Every time he did that, of course, he would strip a round from the magazine. It would be loaded into the chamber, stripped and loaded into the chamber, and then when he pulled it back again, of course he wasn't firing, when he pulled it back again, the extractor and the bolt coming back would strip out that round, pop it out of the chamber, and throw it out. And he basically cycled through the entire 15-round magazine until the gun was empty. Each time, of course, letting the bolt slam home on its own. Problem with that was, my friend's very astute, but we were all a little bit new to firearms. He'd had some experience with them at a kibbutz in Israel, but minimal. Problem with that was, he's a very astute fellow. He looked at the rounds afterwards when he was going to reload the magazine and noticed that every single primer had been indented, and every single one of them. What was happening is the firearm either had an issue with its firing pin, in that it was traveling too far. It was striking the primer not enough to actually fire the round, but pretty darn close, enough to indent it to the point where it was visible. Or there might have been a problem with the head spacing, how far the barrel is recessed into the actual receiver, because I mean, we're talking fractions can make the difference between whether or not this thing goes off, or you've got a problem. The guns didn't actually fire the rounds, but there is a situation called a Slamfire, and what that is is you pull the bolt back on a gun, you release it, you strip around, the round is chambered, and what happens is, because of the forward motion, because of either a headspace issue or perhaps the forward motion, the firing pin actually travels, inertia, it goes forward, it strikes the primer, bam, the gun goes off. And the same gun we're talking about, we had it out maybe about 2 or 3 years ago. First time it's been out in a decade, I'm sure. And my friend chambered around, and lo and behold, he let it go. The gun happened to, thank God, be aimed downrange in a safe attitude. It slam fired. Just in releasing it, chambering around, ostensibly to be ready to fire the gun, it fired. That round went downrange. Had there been someone in front of it, they would have been shot. Which goes back to what I said about earlier, my earlier story, when we were in his bedroom and he noticed that it was dimpling the primers. Any one of those rounds could have went off in his bedroom. For that reason, it's really not a good idea to test the action of anything using live rounds anywhere but on the range itself. And I would say that for the first couple times you get a firearm, you might even not want to do that until you're sure everything is kosher and everything is working properly. That's where these come in. These are snap caps, and they are the same dimension exact of a real round, but there's no firepower in there, or rather powder in there, and it does have a primer. It's spring loaded, so it can actually take a strike from a firing pin. And that's one of its other rounds. A lot of people use these because they don't like dry firing a gun. And when you get into firearms, you'll hear that all the time. It's not a good idea to dry fire a gun. That is to, cock it or pull the bolt back, let it go, and then fire it without an actual round in it. It can damage the firing pin and the mechanism over time. So it's not a good idea. A lot of people invest in snap caps for that one reason. They simply don't want to dry fire the gun. They can actually clean the gun, insert one of these, pull the trigger, it will fire here, no damage done, and just leave this in the gun until the next time they're ready to use it. I would say there's 2 other very good reasons to buy one of these. And by the way, they come in, according to the package here, something like 100 different calibers. I've seen them in some pretty rare calibers. 9mm happens to be a caliber that I have a handgun chambered in, and also several carbines, so this is a good deal for me. 2 other uses, important ones. First of all, if you're new to firearms and you go and buy a carbine, you go and buy a rifle, you go and buy a pistol, first thing you want to do is actually play with that thing and see how it works, and you don't want to do it with a live round. And yet there's no other real way to get a feel for how it loads, strips a clip, ejects, how to load the magazine, etc. This is a perfect solution. Buying a gun for the first time, buy snap caps in that caliber. Play with it with this before you actually go to the range and start using live rounds. Second reason to have these, and this is a very good one, is actually a variation of that. You're very familiar with firearms, but you want to teach other people how to use them. You want to teach them how to chamber a round, cock the slide on a pistol, whatever the case may be, but you don't want to do that with a live round. And you ideally like to do that in the comfort of your home in a relaxed position instead of out on the range where people's hearts are pumping if they're not familiar with firearms. Perfect solution. So think about it. New to firearms, in a position where you may be teaching someone how to use them, go get some snap caps and the calibers for the guns that you're most likely to be teaching people. Not an inexpensive proposition. These cost me $20, but you know what? Again, for me, because I have so many firearms chambered in this round, a good deal. And probably, worth the cost, considering how much real ammunition is. Having 5 of these kicking around to be able to test guns and teach people how to use them and do things safely, well worth it. That's it for that.